I used to be terrified of starting over. Like, genuinely terrified. The thought of going back to the beginning of something after putting all that work in didn't just feel difficult, it felt pointless. I mean, what was the point? Why didn't it work? Was any of it even worth it? And then, life kinda answered that question for me. I nearly lost everything I had ever tried to build, and I had no choice but to start over again. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I kept coming back to certain films, not for distraction, not to escape, but because they were saying something I needed to hear. Something about starting over I hadn't understood yet. Here's the thing about starting over that nobody really tells you. It's not going back to zero. It feels like that, it looks like that from the outside. People around you might even treat it like a zero, but it's not. Because you're not the same person who started the first time. You know things now. You have made the mistakes, you have learned what doesn't work, and that's not nothing. That's actually everything. Every failed attempt, every wrong turn, every moment you thought, this is it, I'm done. All of it becomes the surface you're standing on when you start again. Not ground zero, further ahead than you think. And 4 films over the years helped me understand why. The first film that showed me this was the one I have already talked about on this channel, The Shawshank Redemption. I have talked about this film before on this channel. It's my favorite film, and I don't think that's a coincidence given everything I have been through. Because Andy Dufresne doesn't start over once, he starts over every single day. Inside those walls with no guarantee that any of it will work, with no proof that hope is even rational. He just keeps going. He builds a library. He writes letters for years before anyone even responds. He crawls through what Red describes as 500 yards of foulness to get to the other side. And here's what gets me about that. He didn't wait until conditions were perfect. He didn't wait until someone gave him permission. He just decided, quietly, stubbornly, that where he wasn't where he was going to stay. There's that moment where he plays music over the prison speakers, and every prisoner in that yard just stops and looks up, and for a few seconds, nobody is in prison. That's what starting over feels like when you do it right. Not freedom, not yet, just a reminder of who he actually is. And sometimes that's enough. But starting over isn't always about surviving a system that's working against you. Sometimes it's just about surviving your own life falling apart. And that's where the pursuit of happiness comes in. The pursuit of happiness hits differently when you have actually been broke. And I mean actually broke, not I can't afford the thing I want broke. The other kind. Chris Gardner loses almost everything while trying to build something. And the thing that stays with me isn't the ending, the job, or the success. It's the middle. The part where he is sleeping in a bathroom with his son, trying to make sure the kid doesn't realize how bad things actually are. There's this quiet dignity in that. He doesn't stop. He doesn't explain himself to anyone. He just keeps showing up to an unpaid internship every single day while having nowhere to sleep at night. And I think about that a lot because starting over isn't always this dramatic or cinematic moment. Sometimes it's just showing up again tomorrow. Even when today was terrible, even when you have no idea if it's working. You gotta show up. That's the whole thing. Both Andy and Chris had something to hold on to. A goal, a son, something pulling them forward. But what happens when you lose everything, including the reason you were fighting in the first place? That's Castaway. Castaway is a film about being completely alone with nothing and having to figure out who you are when the only thing that defined you is completely gone. Chuck Nolan loses 4 years of his life on that island. 4 years. And when he comes back, his life has moved on without him. The woman he loved has married someone else. The world he knew didn't quite fit anymore. And he stands at that crossroads and has to decide what to do next with nothing. And I have thought about that crossroads scene a lot because there's a moment in everyone's life when you're standing in the middle of everything falling apart and you genuinely don't know which direction to go. And the film doesn't give him an easy answer. It doesn't give him a sign. It just shows him standing there and then choose direction. Any direction. Because the worst thing you can do at a crossroads is standing still. I have been at that crossroads more than once, and the only thing that kept me going was deciding that any direction was better than staying where I was. And then there's Forrest Gump, which is maybe the most quietly radical film about starting over ever made. Because Forrest doesn't start over. He doesn't have a plan. He doesn't sit down and figure out his next 5 moves. He just runs. When Jenny leaves, he runs. When he doesn't know what else to do, he runs. When he doesn't know what to say, he runs. Not away from things, just forward. And something about that is more honest than most advice I have ever been given about starting over. Because sometimes you don't need a plan. You don't need to understand why it fell apart. You don't need closure or a clear next step or permission from anyone. You just need to move. Put one foot in front of the other and keep going. See what's on the other side. Forrest runs for 3 years, 2 months, 14 days and 16 hours. And when he stops, he just stops and goes home. And somehow that's enough. I think that's the most human thing any of these films ever say about starting over. You don't have to have it figured out. You just have to keep moving. I used to think that starting over meant failure. That if things had worked the way they were supposed to, I wouldn't have to. But I don't think that anymore. Because starting over means you tried something. It means you tried to build something even if it fell apart. It means you know something now. Something you didn't know before. And yeah, it's scary. It was scary for Andy Dufresne every single day in that prison. It was scary for Chris Gardner every single night in that shelter. It was scary for Chuck Nolan standing at that crossroad with nowhere to go. But they all did it anyway. Not because they weren't afraid, but because they decided that staying where they were was more scarier than what came next. And that's the thing about starting over that I wish someone had told me earlier. You are not starting from zero. You never were. You are starting from everything you have already survived. And that is further ahead than you think. Now I'm curious, is there a film that helped you through a moment in your life where you needed to start over again? Tell me in the comments. I would genuinely love to know about it. And remember, it's not about how many times you fall. It's about what you know the next time you get up. Until next time, stay happy and curious.